Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. Who am I here with?
Dr. Howie Jacobson of AskHowie.com.
And neither of us are the medical type of doctors. We're the PhD kind. Howie, I wanted to talk to you today about a simple quote that I'm a little bit obsessed with by James Clear. He's the author of Atomic Habits, and he says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. This is such a paradigm shift, and I heard it a long time ago, but I didn't realize that I'd integrated it. It's actually in large part responsible for the Defeat Your Craving system because I thought very systemically about what I was doing with Defeat Your Cravings. I mean, originally it was another name brand and our brand, but it was another name brand, and I split with my partner and I developed Defeat Your Cravings. I realized that it's a system of systems, and it works because most people don't have systems for each of the various components. So for example, this is a rules-based system, and the very first step is to create at least one simple rule that you could and would follow that would make a big difference, even though it's not an extraordinary burden on you. So maybe it's I'll never go back for seconds again. Maybe it's that simple. When you have a rule in place like that, that's a system. In and of itself, the rule is a system. And it sets up a tripwire. It separates your brain into two different sets of thoughts, two different parts, which we affectionately call the lizard brain and the rational brain. But there are those thoughts that suggest that you will go back for seconds, and those thoughts that suggest that you won't. Up until the point that people decide to set up a system with a very definitive rule that functions as a tripwire, they don't really know when they're having a thought that's part of their constructive versus destructive self, right? If they haven't really decided on a rule, they don't really know what thoughts could be trouble. Not like they don't know, but they're not aware of them. They're not alert for them. And suddenly they have this tripwire and they hear the thought that says, oh, come on, it's Christmas. We can have seconds, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, those thoughts can be attended to more carefully. That in and of itself is a large part of how I got better. But then there's a system for disempowering those thoughts. So I say, hey, another name for Christmas is Wednesday, and I made these decisions about how I wanted to eat, and I'm getting all these benefits from them. And so thank you very much, Mr. Lower Brain, Mr. Food Monster, but I never have seconds. I never go back for seconds. Then there's a system for attaching motivation to those rules. Then there's a system for automating the whole process so that we have a little ritual that people go through to reinforce their systems and have them triggered when they're about to eat anything, so that any association they have with food puts those systems in action. There are systems for recovery. There are systems for kind of finding meaning and purpose once you've done all this. And it all works together as a system. And so the implication is that when there's a problem, rather than blaming your character, rather than thinking there's something wrong with you, you step back and you say, there must be something wrong with one of my systems. And we carefully evaluate where the problem is, make adjustments, and move on. And so I'm just kind of curious, what do you think about this way of thinking? Do you see parallels for it in the coaching that you do? Do you see any flaws in it? Do you see any potential pitfalls? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly empowering, and it also has the added benefit of undermining shame.
Undermining shame. Yes.
Because I'm thinking about like the whole systems world kind of became commercially interesting with the work of Warren Bennis and some others around Six Sigma and continuous improvement based on this Japanese continual improvement processes in a span of a decade or so turned the Japanese cars from laughing stocks into the best engineered and manufactured vehicles on the planet. In an American factory, a piece came out bent or incorrect, and they would look for who to blame, who is at fault. And the last thing you wanted to do was pull the power off of the assembly line because time is money.
Right.
You may remember the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, when everyone assumed that your car was likely to be a lemon.
I do when I first had cars. I do.
And the Japanese system, the sort of Zazen, was okay, if something comes out wrong, the person who pulls the stop cord on the line is the hero. And the question not is who screwed up, but where did our systems go wrong?
Right.
And so everybody became an ally of the detective process. And if it was a person's fault, somebody wasn't paying attention, then we look at, well, what was the system that allowed that to not get noticed and corrected? What was the system that allowed this person to not be trained properly? Or what was the system that allowed this person to be hired? It was never personal. It was always about the systems. We can put them in place when we are in our right minds, when we're powerful, and then they pay dividends for years or decades down the road. So as sort of like when you're feeling really motivated, put your energy into systems as opposed to heroic acts of self-denial.
Exactly. I remember in the business world when small businesses were trying to adopt this philosophy, the saying was that there are no people problems, only system problems. I think that there were certain philosophies that took it too far. I like the E-Myth system for generating systems in business to a large extent, but they felt like you should never have a people dependency. Basically, your system should be able to be executed by a bunch of monkeys. I don't think that's true. I think that's kind of anti-leadership. And I think that you want people who innovate and think for themselves and foster change within the organization. But I do like the idea that there aren't any people problems, there are only systems problems. And I wonder why that hasn't been applied to the field of addiction. Why hasn't it been applied to overeating in particular? I don't know if it's a breakthrough for me in the sense of this is the way I've always been thinking, but this is language that I wasn't using for it before. I think it's really powerful, particularly the anti-shame part of it.
Yeah, and when you first articulated the sentence, I was remembering other articulations that sound very similar, which I learned as a musician. I imagine you did too. I know you're quite an accomplished musician, that you don't learn a piece until you can play it right. You practice until you can't play it wrong.
I did not learn that. I became a musician by Black gospel 400-pound African-American lady that said, "Child, you just go like this." So I did not learn that like that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've heard a similar thing from Chris Voss, the negotiation expert, and I don't know if he originated or came up with it, which you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your preparation, which again, your preparation is part of your system. So I don't know if you remember years and years and years ago, we're both friends and associates of Perry Marshall, a well-known business thinker.
I still talk to him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He had a guy on, I think his name was Sam Carpenter, who had a book called Work the System. It was all about this. The system will carry you when you can't carry yourself. It's like anything. If you don't take care of your Vitamix, if you don't clean your Vitamix, it's going to stop making smoothies for you. If you don't clean your Omega juicer, it's going to stop making juice for you. If you don't take care of your systems, notice where they're working, notice where they aren't working, upgrade parts of it, do audits, pay attention to them, appreciate them, they're going to break down. So I think maybe that's the gap between E-Myth, which is just, let's make this so that humans are no longer necessary. We have a relationship with our systems in the same way we'd have a relationship with anybody, and we have to invest in those. We give energy to them so that they can give energy to us.
So they can carry us when we can't carry ourselves.
Yeah.
There are inevitably those times, right?
Yep.
Very cool. Thank you, buddy. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't? Have you encountered this in your own coaching of people?
Yeah, well, it's the easiest place to make progress because when people are fighting against their impulses, it's a hard fight. But when people are improving their systems, it's almost like they've time shifted. I used to think about this like I would take baths. I've over the years become very temperature sensitive. I really don't like cold. So I'd be in a hot bath and I wouldn't want to get out because it was winter or something and just the air is cold and the bath is hot. And I knew I could wait there until the water became cold and I would turn into a prune. And like that wasn't appealing to me. And I just felt like, I can't get out. What I could do though was pull the plug. And once I pulled the plug, I then made getting out of the bathtub quick and inevitable. But it was much easier to pull the plug than to get out of the tub.
Yeah.
Right? It's easier to sign up for 10 sessions with a personal trainer than to go work out.
Yes, exactly. It's a system.
Yeah. So I think, what is that? The Ulysses contract or something? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely.
The Odyssey, the ship is going through this body of water where the sirens are, these
I know the story, sure.
the singers with these beautiful voices, and any man who hears the sirens jumps overboard and tries to swim to them and drowns. And Odysseus wanted to hear them, so he told all his crew to plug up their ears with wax, but tie him to the mast so he could hear it and he wouldn't jump off. That's a system.
Absolutely. I was brought up in a family of psychologists, and I was taught to always look at your responsibility for whatever went wrong. And I was further taught that there were elements of character in whatever went wrong. So if you had a fight with your sister, or, you got a failing grade, or, anything interpersonal was not going correctly, the question you're asking was really, what's wrong with me? And there was a lot of benefit from that. There was a lot of guilt associated with it also, but there was a lot of benefit from it because, you can only really ever change what's on your side of the street. It often felt like a big mystery. Like I must have some pain inside of me that I'm trying to repeat in my life so I don't actually feel it. And it's going to take me years to figure out what that is. Or there must have been some traumatic event that I'm not aware of. One of my coaches actually brought this quote to my attention again. I think that that's the value of the paradigm shift, is that you're not asking what's wrong with me, but how can my systems be improved? Part of the Defeat Your Craving system is a ritual that you use right before you eat or drink anything caloric. You stop asking what's wrong with me and ask, how are my systems failing me and what needs to be improved?
There's certainly value in taking responsibility. For me, part of taking responsibility is harm reduction. So if I'm getting into fights with someone because, whatever, like, I don't know why. I'm just, I'm short-tempered at that time of day or when I see them or something about them or something about the environment triggers something unpleasant in me that triggers something unpleasant in them. Like, okay, I can take time to figure that out. But in the meantime, if there's something I can do that's short of a psychological overhaul, it kind of behooves me to do it.
Yes.
I remember having an argument when I was a school teacher with another teacher whose views were very different from mine. So it was always fun to argue with him. I was talking about virtue, and he basically said, I don't want to live in a world where people have to exercise virtue for me to be okay in the world. I want a world where it's set up so that it's easy for people to do the right thing.
I love it. When you take care of the behavior first, the psychological overhaul is much easier because the feelings are present and they're not being kind of acted away by the actions. I've become a behavior first guy, even after all my years of psychodynamic training and all the therapy that I was in and the therapy that I did as a burgeoning old man.
Yeah.
I'm 60, dude. I can't believe I'm 60.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you. I survived, right? I got here.
According to the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, when Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 commandments, he basically gives a little preamble. It says, okay, everybody, listen up. Here it comes. And according to the scripture, the people say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen, in that order.
Oh, interesting. Behavior first.
Yes.
Behavior first, yeah.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.